Okay. So Ross will briefly start with what MvvM is, and then he will talk us through MvvmCross and again native app development and code sharing. Again, Ross, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have Ross here.
Remember I brought a presenter mouse, which might help at the start. Perfect. So hello everyone, thank you for coming. So my name's Ross Dargan. I work for a company called Waterstones. We're based in the northeast of England, a place called Durham. It's very nice. I don't really use Macs before, so I'm really enjoying the keynote transition, so sorry about that. I'm trying to not make it that bad. I've been a C# developer for about 10 years. I'm doing mobile for a couple of years now. I did actually put a reminder in here. I don't know if anybody of you heard of OneSec. It's a little app that you just take a second video every day. So whenever you do anything quite unique, it's nice to get a little video of it. So I'm just going to take a little video if you don't mind now, and then we'll move on. I won't be long. We're Xamarin Premier Partners, if you know what that means. There we go. You can wave if you want. Oh, wait, there, it's crashed. Stupid idea right now. Cried out loud. Take one later. Never mind. Someone remind me. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. Can everyone see all right? It's a little bit... Sorry. Yeah, okay. We'll see how we get on. So I'm going to quickly show you what the problem that MvvmCross tries to solve is. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the other ways of doing it, potentially. Explain what MvvM is, because some of you might not have heard. And then we'll dive into MvvmCross. I've also chucked in a few quotes. It's quite a heavy talk, this, so I wanted to break it up a little bit. The stuff that I'm going to be demoing, I'm going to be doing a lot of live coding. I'm a developer, not a designer. I'm one of them types, I'm afraid. So it's not going to be too pretty. Can anyone guess who came up with that quote? Anyone know? No? You? No, it wasn't me. It was, sorry, keynote. Fancy. That was Scott Hanselman. Anyway, okay, this is Xamarin. I take it everybody has a rough idea of what Xamarin is. Let's write in C#, and you can target iOS, Android, and Windows. I've censored what it can target. All right, so we've got this shared app logic. We can use PCLs or pickles if you evolve. We can share our business logic and the clever stuff. And all we have to do is write the front ends for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone using the native sort of language, but in C#. And what you end up doing is lots of code that looks a little bit like this, where you get the text box from the screen and you update it based on some object you've got from your shared clever business layer. And you've got to update it when you save it. That's Android. This is WinRT. You want to see iOS? And no, you don't. It's really dull code. It's horrible code that you don't really ever have to want to write, but you have to. It's really tedious, boilerplate stuff. And if you have to do any sort of validation in there, or any kind of platform-specific cleverness, you can't share any of that code, and it's really not very nice. And it's really hard to test that code as well to make sure you get it right. So that's a problem that we're trying to solve. So how do we solve these sort of problems? Well, we use patterns. The best picture I could find of a pattern, a cross-stitch one, sorry. So what sort of patterns? Well, the UI ones, the common ones that we sort of encounter are MVC. Now, MVC is ideal for stateless applications. It's quite popular now for web development. It is ironically used for iOS, but not quite right. MVP, I really like MVP. I think MVP is a great pattern, especially if you're dealing with sort of legacy stuff with Windows Forms. So you basically define an interface for your view, and then you code against that interface. You never talk to the view directly. But you still have to do all that boilerplate code. It still exists. It doesn't get rid of it. So it doesn't really solve our problem. And then finally, we've got MvvM, where we replace that with bindings. So what this means is that we do sort of event-driven updating. So the view tells the view model when stuff has happened, or the view model tells the view when stuff has happened through events. Okay. So a brief history of MvvM. That is not a serial killer. That is John Grossman. He created WPF and Silverlight. He was the architect of it all. it was based on Martin Fowler's presentation model. So it's got a good pedigree. It's a well understood pattern, and it's been around since about 2005, so nearly 10 years now. So this is kind of what it looks like. Horrible. You can't really see that, can you? So what we've got is we've got our shared layer, our models and our data layer and our services. This is the shared stuff that Xamarin is really good at. And then sitting on top of that, we have something called view models, which is part of the MvvM pattern. Completely isolated from that, we then have our views and our tests. And the views and the tests talk to the view models in the same sort of way, or they can apply tests to them. So let me show you some of this. So the view models expose an event, which is defined in an interface, and the views subscribe to that event. And that event will tell them when things have been updated, when properties have changed. The other things that you really need to know about a view model, a view, is that it has to have a data context. It has to know which view model it needs to subscribe to. And then what you do is you set things like the text box, you add bindings to them. And a binding is a link between the view and the view model. So it will tell the text box to get its text property from this property on the view model. Okay? They can be one-way or two-way. So a label, for example, is only ever going to be one way. It's only ever going to get the contents from the view model. But a text box, when somebody types in it, might update the view model. So that would be a two-way binding. And there's a few other options that people tend not to use. Sometimes you'll also use a converter. So often in a view model, you might have an isValid property to say that a required field's been filled in, and that's going to be Boolean. But on all of the platforms that we target, do any of them have a visibility setting that's Boolean? Not a single one of them do. 2 of them have enums, and iOS has a hidden property, which is reversed. It's kind of odd. Okay, and commands. Commands set on a view model, and these are a way to tell for the view to tell a view model that something has happened, a button has been pressed, or an item has been selected, or something like that. You can use a command to execute that, and you can pass a parameter in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a brief demo of MvvM, and then we'll jump on to MvvmCross. Come right here. Up to the right screen. Here we go. So I'll just do a WinRT application. We'll call it app 14. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a view model. Where is it? And it's added as a solution item, which was why I didn't appear probably. That's confusing. Let's just delete that and add another one. So, as I said, the only thing that makes a view model is because it exposes an event and implements an interface. I notify property changed. And that's the event that it does. So what I'm going to do is just put a property on here. We'll call it first name. And all we need to do is we need to tell the view when that property gets updated. So what I'll do is in the setter for that property, I'll check if property changed has been subscribed to. I'll execute it if it has. And we've got to tell it the property name of what's changed. I'll give it a first value. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is inside my view, I'm going to add a text box, and I'm going to set the text to equal. So this is the binding, and call it first name. And I'm going to set the mode to two-way because we want to update it. Now you don't technically have to do that because it knows by default in the text box it's going to be a two-way binding, but I will. And I will set a text block. And I'll set that to the same thing, so they're going to show the same piece of text. And I'm going to add a button that's going to do nothing, and I'll tell you why I'm adding that in a second. Okay, now the final thing I need to do is I need to tell that view what its view model is. And that's the data context. So I'm going to send this to my view model. There we go. And if we run this, everything goes well. Now what I've done is put it at the top right hand corner and not given it any margin or any width or anything like that. So we can't see anything. So let me just put it in a stat panel with a bit of margin. Can everyone see what I'm typing okay? Can't tell from here. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, okay. There we go. Oh. Yeah. So what I've gone and done there is enabled some kind of help assistant screen reading. Let's just disable that. That blue line should go. There we go. So if I type in here, nothing will happen. But if I come out of the box by changing focus, then what it's going to do is it's going to update the view model. The view model is going to tell the view that that's updated, and then the text block is going to update itself. Okay? Microsoft are the only platform that don't update as you type. iOS and Android will update as you type. Microsoft decide to wait until it loses focus. There's a little cheat you can do to stop it from doing that. And what you can, inside the binding, if you're using 8.1, you can set the update source trigger to properly changed, and then when you type, it will update. Okay. So that is MvvM. I'm not going to show you the command stuff because everybody just uses a relay command that you get with a framework. And all the stuff I've shown you there where I've had to do this kind of code here, you never really write code like that. You always put that in a base class and it's always hidden by the framework from you. And where I've assigned the data context in the view, again, the framework tends to do that for you, but hopefully that'll all make more sense as I get into MvvmCross. So, back to the presentation. Another quote. Quite like this quote. Any guess who wrote this one? No? I'll give you that one. Martin Fowler. Okay, what you all came for. So, MvvmCross was written by this very pixelated fella called Stuart Lodge. The project was started in 2010. It's now on a very stable third release, and it's really quite well supported for an open source project. But before we get onto it, let's talk about what MvvM supports without the cross bit, what you can just write MvvM code with. So you can do MvvM in WPF, you could do it in Windows Store, do it in Windows Phone, you can do it in Silverlight. Is anybody doing Silverlight? Anyway, MvvmCross adds support for iOS, Android, and Mac. Okay, so they're the other platforms that you can take your view models and then you'll be able to run them on it. So if you're only going to target the other platforms, WPF, WinRT, Windows Phone, Silverlight, you can just share your view models. You don't need to use MvvmCross. If you want to go into the mobile platforms, that's when you want to start looking at MvvmCross. So let's do a demo of MvvmCross. So as I remember how to use a Mac. Now, I'm going to use a tool to do this called Ninja Coder. So what Ninja Coder is going to do is it's going to create all the projects for me and add all the NuGet packages that you want and stuff like that. It's just to stop you having to watch me do really boring things. You pick which platforms you want to target. I'm going to leave Windows Phone 8 off, simply because it does not work. for Windows Phone. I don't know why. I will add it manually so I can show you it, but Ninja Coder just screws it up when it tries to add it. And it's got some really nice stuff here that, again, doesn't work. I don't know why they put it on the screen. So if we finish it, it's going to go away and it's going to create all the projects. As I said, you can do all this manually. What you have to do is add a portable class library, target all the platforms you're going to want to use. Does everybody know what a portable class library is? I'm assuming that people do now. When I first started doing talks about this, I assumed nobody did. But basically, it gives you a subset of all the different frameworks you want to target. So it'll only let you use APIs that are available across everything that you've said that your library is going to be used in every time of a project. So you can't do any kind of UI stuff or anything like that. So it's going to create a portable class library. It's going to add all the NuGet packages required for MvvmCross. And then what it's going to do is it's going to create an iOS, an Android, a Windows Phone project, and again add all the required NuGet packages for them. So I'm just going to let it wear away. It's also going to do some really nice things like create base view models for you. And it's going to create a base view for everything, so you've got one place to go to if you want to change stuff. It does some really quite nice things. It's worth looking at. But as I said, I'll be adding Windows Phone manually because it doesn't do that one very well. So there we go. So if we have a look at the core project, and we have a look at main view model, I'm going to delete everything that's put in because it gives you a lot we don't necessarily need. And what we're going to do is we'll do what we did before. So I'm going to add a property on here. I'll put a string, I'll put a first name. And like I did before, we're going to have to notify the view if this property changes so that it can update itself. So if we have a look at the base view model, then you can see what they've done is they've added in this protected set property. And this does something called raise property changed, and it checks to make sure it actually has changed, because if it hasn't changed, there's no point telling the view that something hasn't changed. Just wasting CPU cycles. So we will call that in here. So we pass in a reference to what it is, and then we give it the value, and then this weird function, it uses this to know the property name. But this is a really dumb way of doing things now, and anyone that's done any kind of WinRT will know that there's a far better way of doing it. So I'm going to copy this and change it a little bit to the better way. So what we can do now is we can put in something called a member name, string, property, give it a default value. And what this says is that take the name of the thing that's called me and put it in here. So it's great for binding. So I can now get rid of this function here, and that'll just work. Okay, so we've got our first name. What I'll do is I'll add it to Android. So I'm going to go into the Android main view, and we'll see here that this isn't really, the code behind is doing nothing, and it shouldn't. You want to try and keep code behind in a view as simplistic as possible. The only stuff you really want to have in there is very, very view specific things. So sometimes you might find that it's a complete nightmare to pass the information you need to your view model. So in that case, all right, put a little bit of code behind to get some detail from the view, but really try to keep it view specific. So I'm going to go to the layouts and have a look at the main view. So Android uses like an XML to define how things are going to be laid out on the screen. We've got an edit text and a text view in here, and it's currently, this is being generated by Ninja Coder. It's just a default one. I'll change this from my property to first name. And if we start that up, run it, and we hope everything's working fine. So I'm using the Android player. Has anyone played about with this? It's really good, isn't it? And you'll notice that I'm using, you'll notice that I'm not using. That works. So I'm obviously running Parallels inside a Mac, trying to talk to an emulator that's sitting on the Mac. That's not a normal thing to do. but there is a very good blog post by James Montemagno about how to do that. So it's worth looking. So if this doesn't work, it's his fault. Please work. So that does look like it should have worked. I think that has crashed. So I'm going to kill that emulator and start it back up, and we'll go to the next platform, and I'll come back to it. So that is dead in the water. There it is. Okay, so I'll start this back up. We all know it should take 19 seconds. Yeah, right. We'll leave it there. Let's switch to the iOS one. I'll come back to Android and show you that running. So what you'll find is that a lot of MvvmCross developers use code-first approach for defining the UI in Android. It's just a little bit easier. I didn't really go into any sort of depth with this in the XML that I showed you for Android, but you'll notice in here there was this MVX bind. That's how you set the binding. You specify that you want the text property of this value to be set to first name, and it's quite nice because it sits inside where you put your UI code. It's kind of where you'd expect it. It's very similar to the MvvM stuff I showed you in WinRT. In iOS, you do it a little bit differently. You use strongly typed declarative. So I'll show you. It'll make sense. You create a button. I can zoom in slightly. I will forget to do this on every single form, so if I forget and you can't see anything, let me know. So what we've defined here is a label and a text field. Again, every platform names everything differently, annoyingly. And we're going to bind the UI label to the first name, and we're going to bind the text field to the first name. Now, what I'm not doing is I'm not telling it which property to bind, and that's because it just implicitly knows that if you're talking to a label, if you don't define what it is, it's going to be the text that you're after. You can specify it if you want. You just put it in here and tell it what the property path is that you're after. Go with the default for now. So let me set this as the start of the project, and I'll switch to simulator. And I almost always forget, but I haven't this time, to tell it to actually build the core project. Why you have to do that, I will never know. If we run this, we have more luck than we do with Android. We should see it pop up in a simulator. Where's it gone? That's not the right one. Oh, there we go. God. Has anyone done live demos of Xamarin before? It certainly is a bit nervous. Right, so we've got a blank screen. That's because I forgot to set default text in. So it is there is a text box there. If I start typing, there we go. So, there we go. Okay, everybody happy with that? Relax a little bit. Let me try and connect to the Android simulator again. There we go. It's not found in listed devices. Okay, we'll skip that for now, and I'll go on to the Windows one. Actually, let's do the WPF one for a change. So WPF, again, it's very, very similar to WinRT. The XAML's almost identical for this. What we're going to do is we're going to put in, we're going to go to the main view, the right place, and zoom in. Now, you'll notice that they put 2 text boxes here rather than a text box and a text block. And the reason they've done it is so that you can tab out of one into the other, so it'll update the screen. You know, I said it only updates when you do focus. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to put in the hack to allow it to actually change. And if we run, and I'm going to change the name of the property to first name. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into the view model. Put a default value in. If we run this now, cool. Right. So let me just copy the XAML from here to the Windows 8 one. I can do the Windows 8 one really quickly, because I'm guessing you're all getting a little bit dull of seeing me typing pretty much the same code. But it's important to note the code that I'm writing is really just binding code. I'm not having to say set the text to this and then once it's saved, set the text back. And I'm doing, if you think about the code you'd write to do this without using bindings, it's actually, there's quite a bit of code to it, because you need to subscribe to the text box when the text is changing and save it to property and then set the label. There's a lot going on, really, for the code that I'm typing in. Okay, so let's put it in here. Right. Now, this isn't going to work, and it's going to tell me that update source trigger doesn't exist in here, and the reason being is that this is targeting Windows 8, and that's a Windows 8.1 property. So I'm going to update it to 8.1. And if I set that as a startup. Is anyone doing WinStore apps? Yay! I really like WinStore apps, but there's not many of us out there doing them.
I started in June, so...
You start in June, okay.
Before Windows 8 came out. About 3 years.
I quite like it, but okay. Well, maybe I'm wasting everyone's time by showing them this. Anyway, there we go. That's working. And then finally, Windows Phone. So this one will be a little bit more interesting, because I'm actually going to have to add this one from scratch, because we've got nothing in here. So if you're not using Ninja Coder, this is the process you'll go through to add a new project. So I'll add the new project. I'm going to go to a Windows Phone app. I'll just add a blank app. And I'm going to give it the same namespace. Demo phone. Okay. Ignore that one. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to add a Silverlight one. There's a slight bug at the minute when you get, and when you add a package to it, it adds the wrong stuff to that. So just ignore that one. Add new project. Windows Phone and Silverlight, that's the one. And I'll just target it. I'll remove the old one because I'll forget about it otherwise and it'll be there forever. Okay, so now that this has been added, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in, I'm going to go to NuGet, and I'm going to add MvvmCross to this project. Just going to use a stable branch. There is some cool stuff in the pre-release, but nothing that I'm demoing here needs any of it, so I'm not going to look at that. And then I'm going to add a reference to the core project, because it needs to be able to see that core project. And if we have a look in here, there's a little to-do cheat sheet that tells you what you need to do to just get the framework all connected up, and it really isn't much. Step 1, add a reference, did that. Step 2, we need to put this in the app.xaml.cs constructor. So I will do that there. And step 3, if I go to the right README file, is to put this in the app.xaml.cs too. There we go. And that's MvvmCross added to this project. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my view. Now notice this one is called first view. We haven't actually told it how to find a view from a view model, but what the framework's doing is it's using convention. It's saying if your view model is called main view model, then look for something called main view. That's going to be the view I'm going to show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this first view to main view. And that does absolutely nothing in the code, so I'm also going to have to do it everywhere else. Wrong designer. There we go. Okay. Perfect. And then finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text box to be first name. Now that little trick that I showed you before to update the view model as you're typing, it doesn't work on Windows Phone 8.0 on the Silverlight one, so I can't do that here, I'm afraid. So let me start the phone. Now I'm actually running this on a real device. The emulator did work on here before I upgraded my Mac, and now it doesn't, so it just blue screens it. Make sure you actually run it. There we go. So if I type and then exit it, it updates it. So that's 5 platforms, I think. It's not the most interesting application of all, but it is showing that your view model works across all 5 apps, and all we're doing is binding. We're not actually having to do any setting, getting, or any kind of updating like that, okay? Really, really simple introduction. The only other thing that I haven't really shown you is that, and I will be showing you a little bit further, is what else is in this core project. There's an app.cs. This just does some stuff that I'll show you later on. It tells it what the start view model is. It tells the framework what the first view model you can navigate to is. And then in each project, there's a setup.cs that again tells the application, tells the framework where to get that core.app from, and we'll use that a little bit further on. So let me go back to the presentation. One more quote. So I picked this quote because the whole reason to use MvvmCross is to save you time. I actually should have picked the mantra from MvvmCross. Stuart's got a really great mantra, which is the whole point is to save you time. If you find yourself fighting the framework, then you don't worry about just working around it a little bit. Get the whole reason for using the framework is to get your product out the door. That's the key thing to do. Okay, your time's precious. Don't waste it worried about some of these things about where the right place to put some code is and stuff like that. Get stuff out there. And this was Steve Jobs, as you haven't guessed, which you probably wouldn't have done because it's quite a random quote. How am I doing for time? 7:30. We've been going for. Okay, we'll keep on going a little bit and then take a break. I think later on. So I'm going to show you some of the more advanced features now of MvvmCross. That was a real whistle tour introduction to binding and Mvvm. So navigation is a real key part. How do you move from one view to another? How do you change pages? If you've done native code, you'll know each platform does it very differently. And some do view-based, some do view model-based. It all depends on which platform you're on. Windows Phone, WinRTV do URI-based. You can give it a URL to navigate to. Android, you start an activity. It's all very, very different. So the way MvvmCross works is it's view model-based. So inside one view model, you say, I want to show this view model, and that view model gets presented to the user. Different frameworks do it different ways. Some frameworks say, I want you to show this view, and the view knows how to find its own view model, and it will instantiate it. I got to be honest, I prefer the way MvvmCross does it. I think you should be navigating from one view model to another, and a view model should know nothing about views. But each to their own. Dependency injection. Dependency injection is such a big topic on its own. I don't have time to go into this into a lot of detail. It's not MvvmCross specific. It's just a really, really cool way of injecting code into your classes. Highly recommend you spend some time learning about dependency injection if that's a new word to you, because it's really, really useful stuff. The gist of it is you define an interface, and it's the interface that you always talk to. You register it with a concrete implementation of that interface. So I'll demo this later, but basically you register it in something called a container, and then you ask the container for an implementation of that, and it magically gives you the right implementation. It'll make sense when you see it, I will. Plugins. Plugins are the way that the framework can sort of, you can package up bits of device-specific implementations and put them on NuGet. So there are plugins out there. I mean, I've written a plugin for NFC reading. There are plugins for color conversion. There's plugins for one of the most common one that you use for visibility. As I've already said, the way you set visibility on each platform is massively different. So there are plugins, and then you can just bind true or false to make something visible or not, which is kind of what you want. But like I said, there are plugins for just about everything. I'll show you that as well. And messaging. So one of the, as I said, you want to keep everything really loosely coupled. So if you're navigating from one view model to another, and you want to get a message, you want to indicate to that first view model that something has happened on the second one, the user's selected something or done something, then there's only so many ways you can do that. There are some really tightly coupled ways. I mean, you could pass in a reference to yourself. The first view model could give a reference to itself to the second view model, and then the second view model could update it. But you're really tightly coupling your view models together, and I wouldn't recommend that. The recommended approach is to use messaging. So you send a message that somebody can listen to and be notified that that has happened. It's just like Service Bus, basically, if that makes it any clearer. But I'll show you that as well. So, a demo of all them things. Right, what I'm not going to do is put you through each 5 apps again, because I think you can probably see that that's going to work. So I'll just stick to probably Windows RT and iOS, if that's all right. So you've got 2 different types. No disagreements. So let's have a look at our view model. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's navigate to a second view model. Okay. So what I'll do is I'm going to add in the second view model, and I'll use, again, Ninja Coder to add this page. So I'll call this the edit view model. Let's assume that we've got a page that shows you your name, and it's read-only, and we're going to put a button on it, and the button's going to take you to a second page where you can edit that name. Okay? It's too easy to do it on the same page. It's going to go away and generate all the pages for me. So I'll go to that edit view model. I'm going to delete all the stuff that's put in there, because we don't want any of that. Now what I'm going to have to do is add a button on here, an edit button. I'll call it edit name command. We don't need a setter for it. And I'm going to do some funky code here. I prefer setting mine in constructors, but you see a lot of people kind of doing this. So I'll follow what everyone else does for this. So I'm going to set this to something called an MvX command. So what this is going to say, I'll increase this size a little bit as well, so people can see it. So what this is going to say is when this I command is executed, I want you to fire this mvx command, and all this does is this takes in an action. So I can have an edit name event in there, and have myself a little event down here. I command, okay, I'll look at the definition of that, has a can execute and an execute on it, and it can execute changed. I'm not going to show you the can execute, but basically it allows you to set a Boolean condition as to whether that command is allowed to fire, and it will enable and disable a button depending on it. It is quite cool, but it's a bit of a faff to show. So in the edit name event, what I want to do is I want to show the view model, and this is going to be the edit view model, like that. Okay. So I will run this for WinRT now. No, I won't. I will add a button to WinRT. That will fire it. So I'll get rid of the edit bit. We don't want to be doing editing here. I'm just going to have a name. I'm going to add an app bar button, so it looks a bit nice. With a label of edit. I'll set the command to the edit name command. So that just tells it which command to fire when it's pressed, and we'll give it a nice edit symbol. Okay. So if you run this now, I haven't forgotten anything. Like a semicolon. Can't see a thing, it's so far zoomed in. There we go. And we've got our label there with edit name. If we press the edit button, it takes us to our second view, which does nothing because I haven't wired anything up in that second view yet. So one of the things we're going to want to wire up into there is pass in the name that's currently set so that it can change it. So we need to pass a parameter from the first view model to the second view model. And the way MvvmCross does this is it looks for an init method on your view model, and it will pass in any parameters you've got in it. So I'm going to create a public void init with a string name. Okay. So let's add a property on here. That's not how we do properties. Let's add a property on here. Ooh, sharp as something. It's a pain in the backside. Right. And again, I'll do the set property. You've got to remember to do that, otherwise it could show you. But if you don't do that, what will happen is it won't update the view when it gets changed. It won't work properly. So what I want to do here is I want to set the first name equal to name. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to, inside this main view model, oh, I forgot to zoom in. Did everyone see what I typed there? Was there enough? Okay. So when I call show view model with this type in, I need to pass in an object that has a property on it called name, and it will use that to call this method. So I'm going to just use an anonymous object to do this. But you could create a DTO to do if you wanted to. And I'll just set it equal to the first name. Okay. So now what I need to do is I need to add first name to the edit view on the WinRT application. we've got insert name here. If I press edit, got the second one, and it's passed in insert name here. So that property's been passed over. And if I type in here, I haven't enabled the automatic, but if I tab out, it'll update it. Okay. But if I press back, it won't have updated here. Okay. So I need to find some way to pass that update back. And that's messaging. So let's add messaging. So I'm going to go to Ninja Coder and add plugin. And I'm going to tick message. Now these are all the different plugins that are sort of core, i.e. part of the MvvM framework that I've provided. There are some community ones, they're not all there, and there's some your user ones. You don't have to go through this to get it. In fact, I found it not to be massively reliable, so I'll add Messenger this way, but I might have to go in and add it via NuGet as well. We'll see. So it's done iOS, it's done Android. Yeah. So oh, we've got Winstore. Okay, might have done it. So what this will have done is it'll have created a Bootstrap folder inside, and inside that Bootstrap is what tells the framework to launch that, to load that Messenger plugin. This is setting up the dependency injection stuff, so it's registering the dependency and it's telling the framework how to load the platform-specific implementation of it. So if I go to my core project now and go to Edit View Model, what I can do is I can add a constructor to this, and I can say I want to take in an IMVX messenger. Cool. Now I'm going to add a button on here that's going to be the save button. So what we need to do is we need to pass to the messenger, we need to tell the messenger to broadcast a message. Now for this we're going to strongly type, we're going to have to create a DTO that'll do it. So I'm going to create a new object which is going to be called update first name message. And this is going to be of type MVX message. Now it's complaining at me because it doesn't take in an empty constructor, it's got to pass in a sender. I'm also going to pass in the name that it's been changed to, and we'll set that, we'll create a property, we'll make that public, okay? So what I can do now, zoom in on this one as well, is in my save event, I'll create that message, and I'm going to pass in first name and the sender is this, and then what I can do is on the messenger I can publish that message. That's it. I'm going to add a second one on here. Actually I'll just leave it this for now. I'll add the second one there now. So what I'm going to do is inside my main view model I now need to know when that message gets published. I need to know about that message. So again in the constructor I'm going to say that I want an IMVX messenger. Now notice that I'm asking for an interface. I'm not asking for the concrete implementation of it. That's all done by dependency injection. Dependency injection can figure out what the correct implementation to give me is. So what I'm going to do inside here is I'm going to ask the messenger, I'm going to subscribe to messages of type update first name, and then I'm going to create a method called name updated. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll update the property first name based on that updated first name. Yeah. Now there's one more thing I've got to do. If we just did this .subscribe to this object, we're basically subscribing to an event and listening for it. you'll know that that's a really easy way to get memory leaks if you don't unsubscribe at some point. So the way that the messenger works here is it uses a weak subscription, which is awesome, but the second that the code gets to there, the garbage collector is going to go, okay, well, nothing's referencing that anymore, and it can bin it. So what we need to do is we need to keep a copy of the token that it gives me back. Okay, so now what will happen is the second that this view model goes out of scope, that subscription will automatically be removed because it'll know it's a weak subscription, it can be gone. So if we run this now, this still isn't going to work, by the way. I know this isn't going to work, but it's not going to work for another WinRT joyous reason. So if I edit this and type in here, and I add my button, just another reason why it's not going to work. Switch over. Again, we've got to put the icon. Oh, solid smiley face will do. Okay, let's try it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint on the main view model on this message received event. And if I press the button, we get the message telling us that it's done. If I play it, and if I press back, it's not done anything there. And the reason being is that WinRT's a little bit bizarre in how it caches views when you're navigating. So what's actually happening is when you're pressing back, it's newing up a whole new view and view model, which is not what you're after really. So you can override that. So in the base view, I'll just do it here. You can do it on a view by view basis if you want. So you just set the navigation cache mode to enabled. So if I edit this now, get rid of this, put in my name, press save, press back. A lot of effort. So I'm going to add one more thing to this, which isn't really that useful now, but it will be later on. I'm going to add a close button to it. Close command. Okay. So to close a view model, i.e. to say that we're finished with this, you just say close and you pass in the view model that you want to close. So I will add that event. Sorry, I'll add the button to the view. Change the icon. Sad face. I swear I spend half of my time looking for icons and the other half coming up with naming convention. Oh, come on, there's got to be a close in here somewhere, hasn't there? There we are, cancel. Lovely. If we save, and then we close, it goes back. Wonderful. Okay, I think it's probably not a bad time for a break. And what I'll do in the next one is we'll take what we've done and we'll make it iOS version of it. Lovely. And I'll get my phone working so I can take a picture next time.